communicate about this form of protest through a movie, and tell us a little bit more about that and about your work in general.
Okay, okay. So I'm a interdisciplinary artist. That's the word I learned along the way. That just means I do a lot of things at once. I guess I got ADD, but so one of the main reasons why I chose film was because of the fact that film was the thing that got the wrong message out about us in the first place. So that like the mainstream media put out this narrative about us that we were thugs and rioters and all of that, and it's an old trick that's been used on black people for a long time. So my thing, I really just wanted to tell a story from an insular place, and it's a lot of people that come through and they drop down, they parachute into situations. You know, white kids with trust funds to get money, they come in with cameras, they take pictures of us, and they leave. And they none of the repercussions come to them. None of the and none of the payoff comes to the people that they point the cameras at. So a big thing about this, and I think I really thank the community I come from, because they trusted me. And they was like, we're not talking to nobody else because we don't know you, but we know him, and he grew up here. And I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate the vulnerability that people gave me and Sabah. And one time for my sister Sabah, she cannot be here. One time for black women that make movies, you know what I'm saying? And also Ms. Dash, she told me to tell you that she loves you and one day she hopes to meet you. So I'm gonna try my best to make that happen. But so yeah, we came, both of us came together. She came, I wasn't out in the streets with a camera. I was one of them. And like you can see me in certain parts of the film, like I wasn't shooting. I was in the mix. And the thing was that I was the one that could draw. I got asked to a meeting of organizers, and I was the one with the artistic skills. So I tried to help where I could. And later on, after all of the situation popped off, I just saw how they was portraying us, and I was like, so I've been building all these skills all my life, so this is the time to use them. So it's time to make a movie about me and my folks, and that's basically why I said that was my motivation for making it.
In the movie, you also showed your other work. We have some pictures of that as well.
Yes.
Can you show
so
them,
that's
please?
me. That's not my work. That is. So these are images, and you could flip through these.
Yeah.
These are images that I created during, I guess, the lull between the non-indictment and the original, I guess, uprising. And this is a part of a project I called All Hands on Deck, and it's basically photographs of people's hands that were key people in this movement. That's Tef Poe's hands. You heard him talk. The hands before was Tara T. Tara was in your documentary. But these are people that I knew and I respected, and they were members of the community of all different races, but they were people from St. Louis, and they all played a different role. Some people stop. That's not that. Okay, so all of the people in that series were people that were either they owned safe spaces and they opened up their doors for black people while they were being tear gassed, or people needed places to organize, or they were preachers, or they were mothers, or they were children of activists. But all of these people were people that were essentially a part of what was going on in the initial uprising. And so West Florissant is a strip that a lot of this stuff happened. So you saw that quick trip that went up. So that's on West Florissant, right? And so when there was an anticipation around a non-indictment, they boarded up all of the buildings. So they had already, they was already planning for us to tear things up. And it's like, you only get half of the story. You don't know what the agitator does. You only see what people that strike back when they put into a corner look like. And so what I wanted to do, when all of those boards went up, it's depressing. Kids live out there, and people got to go to work and school. So me and a couple of my friends, I talked to a dude, his name is Michael Skolnick. He came down when I got to meet Harry Belafonte. He worked with Harry Belafonte, and we came up with an idea to put these hands up. And so, like literally, he flew in, he flew out. I talked to him the next day. We talked about the idea. He flew back from New York, and then His organization put up the money, and me, him, and my homies, we just printed out a bunch of hands. I took the pictures and we put them up, and we put them up all up and down West Florissant, in anticipation of the media coming out, because we didn't want it to look like a war zone when they got out there. And so this got a lot of press for me. So can you go forward on the next images? So these next images, when we talk about how the different forms of activism, see, I also think that black people just showing themselves in different lights is activism. And I think black people enjoy its moments of activism. And I think black people just staying alive for the simple sake of being alive when everything's trying to crush you is activism. So a lot of this work, like this is a project that I called Negrophilia. And it was something, these were constant meditations that I did day in and day out. I made these 6x6 pieces with just me writing down and tearing out things and gluing them together about what I was seeing day in and day out. And it was me dealing with the trauma or whatever of going through it every day, you know? I don't like to, I get kind of agitated around words like trauma and self-care and all of these words that we throw around that I don't think everybody should be using, quite frankly, because I don't think that it's as crucial in certain situations. And that's no disrespect. It's different mediums to how heavy people take it. But this was me working through my own problems. So if you could move forward, that would be great. I don't want to take up the whole thing with my stuff. Mm-hmm. So all of these are different images that I worked on during this time. And I came up with over 130 of these. And I'll be showing all of this work next year in St. Louis at the University of Missouri. So stop. So this is a project that I've been working on for the last 3 years. And this is about creating new mythology and cosmology around black people, and it's called Darker Gods. And so I write different mythologies around, I guess, tropes and ideas around blackness, and I make them into, I personify them in deities and make them into gods. And so my mom is Creole. And so a lot of this started with my journey of trying to figure out where I come from, because she moved up to St. Louis in the 60s. And so I went back and studied voodoo culture, and I studied different things in Nigerian culture and just different ideas about how we tell stories. And so right now I'm focused on activism that isn't based in black pain, basically. So we talk about our pain all the time. And we put it on display for white folks, and they sit there and they watch, and we give them. It's almost like church. It's almost like penance. Like by sitting here watching me talk about how bad my life is, you think that you're a better person. And I'm really tired of doing that. And so what I've been trying to do now is create things that big up black people and make them feel bigger and larger than the world tells them they are. And so this is what this project is about. So you can move forward through these, and that's my stuff. So that's the end of me. Boom. That's it.
Yeah, so, okay, your movie was shown yesterday, and also you have very similar characters in your movie, but they're very different. So tell us about why you chose to make your movie this way and how you do your work.
Yeah, so thank you and congratulations for your film. I saw it in Paris like a couple of months ago. I was very happy to see some of the same characters I followed in Ferguson in 2015 for the anniversary of the death of Michael Brown. I started my film in France because I wanted to show that police brutality was not only an issue in the States, and my point of departure was the fact that even in France, we know more about the people who are killed by the police in the US than about those who are killed in our own country. Meaning that we know the names of Mike Brown, of Eric Garner, of Sandra Bland, but it's very difficult for people to name French people who are killed by the police. And we know that even if the number of people who are killed is not the same as in the US, because the level of violence is not the same. We don't have the same issue with weapons, with guns. Still, most of the people who die in the hand of the police are mostly Arabs or black, and mostly young men from like poor neighborhoods. And the other thing is that, we can't name anyone. If I tell, even for people here who know about France, you've never heard the name of Amadou Koumé or Ali Ziri, who are people who were killed those last years by the French police. We've heard a little more about Adama Traoré, thanks to social media, but it's still not something that we see. And the way the French media cover police brutality is very interesting, because whenever something happens in the US, the coverage speaks about race, about racism. But when it's in France, you don't even read anything about the color of the people who dies. So you can guess that the person is black because Adama Traoré is an African name. But you have never read anything about the fact that he was a black Muslim man and that the police officers were white. So that's something that is like, if the France was unable to see what was happening right, in front of them, but they are more likely to understand, and it's more comfortable to speak about racism when it happens out of France. So my goal was to parallel what was happening in France and in the US, to show that white supremacy was something global. The slave trade wasn't focused on one country. France was one of the more active countries in the slave trade, and the consequences on from that and from the history of colonization of France are still very active and very visible. But it's still a taboo. And the documentary to me was a way to make people understand that we were going through the same issues, and that we have Mike Browns in France, we have Sandra Blands, and we need to acknowledge them and to make people understand that we don't need to. We have to show solidarity with the US, but we also have to face what we're going through as French citizens.
Yeah. I mean, that's also something I think is very recognizable for people living in Belgium as well. So, Nicole, maybe you are in academia, something very different than two movies. So tell me some more, well, not very different. Tell me some more about your work and how you communicate about struggle.
Yeah, hello everyone. First of all, I'm here as a fellow human being, I would say, that sees this injustice and knows it's wrong what's going on. And as a white woman, I would say that in a racist society, stupidity and ignorance are an option for me, still. So
right? The notion of a black body with a political message that says racism and talks about racism, that puts forward the idea that everyday practices, everyday cultural, traditional practices are connected to our colonial past, was something that they did not expect. And that then also led towards a burgeoning civil rights movement, you could say, in the Netherlands. Professor Wecker has called it the second anti-racism wave. And I think there it's also necessary to keep on coming back to the people who were before us saying all these things. So it's Philomena Essed, it's Lulu Helder, it's Scotty Gauwmet, it's all these academics, these artists, Felix de Rooij, Norman de Palm, John Leerdam, who was here yesterday, all these people before us who were saying these things, but who got burnt out, who got burnt up, who had to think about, okay, how do I make a career, how do I live? And I think one of the interesting things in the film that was brought forward, and I think in all of our works, is this notion of how to continue when the cameras have gone, right? How do you keep that going? How do you make sure that you yourself don't fall down a well and can't get back up? Or get incarcerated, or end up in places where you think, what happened there? And for me, I think it's the people around me who pretty much saved me. If else I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys.
Oh yeah, that's very recognizable, I think, for everyone. So maybe, Damon, you can elaborate a little bit about that, because of course we see the movie, but then what about today, and who are these people still around? Who is speaking? Who is creating the message today?
I think there are people still around, but we have lost people. Like at the end of the movie, there's a tribute to people that we've lost. Like Darren Seal is somebody I knew. And the funny thing is, like, Darren is a controversial figure to a lot of people. He is not, like, you either like him or you don't. But the thing is that, like, when we were talking about, so me and Savah made an agreement in the beginning. Whatever happened, whatever in regards to St. Louis, I had the last call on, and I really respect that. And I really respect that she really, we held that up, and it was no arguments about any of that. But I just really want to do a tribute for somebody that I know died and went to their grave fighting for this. And it's been a lot of speculation around his death, but he went to his death trying to help black people, whether he was doing it in the right way or not. And Josh is he was 17 when he went to jail, and he's got 7 years, almost a decade in jail for a trumped up charge to do with protest. And I mean, he's a kid, and they taken the best part of his life away from him. And so one thing that I like to always let people know is that, like, people romanticize things like this struggle, and they romanticize the Panthers. Like, my father's a Black Panther. He's 75 years old. And the first thing he told me when this started happening, it was like, yo, you better understand what this finna be for you, you know? Like, and the bigger your name get, the worse it's gonna get. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not as romantic as people want to think it is. And it's not, people only cling to, like, the clothes and the music and things of that nature, but they don't see how debilitating these situations can be. As far as Brittany is alive and well, and her daughter's great, and she's growing, Kenna. And Dave is going through a few things, but he's good. His family is good. They are thriving. As far as from the last time I talked to him, I remember he moved to go get work somewhere else, but he is still cop watching. And Hands Up United is still a thing. They actually just did a fundraiser so that they could send a bunch of black kids and their fathers to go see Black Panther. So they bought a bunch of tickets so that people that couldn't afford to go see Black Panther. That was Rika and Dub. They did that. You see T-Dub, he was in my film, also in your film. I talked to Tuff more than anybody. He's the Nasir Jones, Nas, for anybody, Nas, the rapper. He's the Nas Fellow at Harvard, so that's a big deal for people that come from where we come from, you know what I'm saying? But understand that we highlights. we the highlight reel. For me to be sitting here in front of you, like we the highlights. There's a lot of people that took a lot of losses, and people that get hurt every day trying to do this. So I just think that I don't know how to put it, but I think that like I feel I'm very lucky and privileged to be able to talk about this. But for one of me, it's 20 or 30 other people that put their lives on the line and that don't get, you know, the acclaim and the praise. So I try to carry them into the room every time I come into the room. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think something Tefpo said also is, and I felt so like he was speaking to me, and maybe a lot of us here in this audience and on this stage as well. It's like the people who fight racism on a philosophical level, they are not there. Their bodies are not where their politics are. So maybe, I mean, in France, can you talk a little bit more about how that situation is? Because I don't feel like we have that same kind of public protest. So how do we put our bodies where our politics are?
It's quite different in France because the level of violence is not the same, and I think it's close to what Delilah was saying before, because most of the people who are killed by the police in the hands, or who die in the hands of the police, are not shot. They die in trucks. They have been asphyxiated. So we don't have ways to prove what happened. Like you have someone who looks, okay, who is being arrested, and then the person dies. And from that point, the police say, okay, he had a disease. That's what happened to Adama Traoré. So because in France, the other difference is that you can be checked in the street. A police officer can request your ID for no reason. And most of the people who are requested, their IDs are blacks and Arabs. If you are Arab or black, if you are perceived as a black or as an Arab, you are 20 times more likely to be checked than any other category of the population. So it starts by being checked, and then if you don't have it, you can be arrested, and then, something happened and you just disappear. So the difference is that you don't have evidences, to show and to display what happens to the people. So there is still that denial. And the other thing is that historically, France is very different. We didn't have historically any group of, activists that were so, central to the French history. We have people who were fighting for the same struggles as Martin Luther King, but they're not famous. If you ask to someone in France who are the big figures of the fight against racism, they will name Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, but they won't be able to name anyone French, because all the people who tried to do something were not that public. And because we have a different culture regarding minorities, meaning that in France it's like either you're French or you're not. And if you're French, we tend to try not to focus on minorities. There is no census on minorities. We don't know exactly how many black people there are, how many Arab people there are. So speaking about race, about minorities, about groups is still a taboo. So that's the reason why we don't have the same way of protesting. Because we have protests, we have had some protests. One of them, I filmed one of them in my documentary. But the conversation about race is not a national conversation as it is in the US. Even if there are much things to do in the US. In France, the first thing we have to do is just to address race. I have been evicted from a national council. I was appointed by the government because I was tackling institutional racism. And the reason why they evicted me from that organization was that I was insulting France by saying that there could be institutional racism. So we're at that point. Even saying that, that there is state-sponsored racism is not acceptable.
With Black Pete's, there was some things going down on the streets. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? How did that go about? Because in that sense, I mean, as you might already all know, we in Belgium have that same problem, but there is no same level of protest or anything along those lines.
Well, even in the Netherlands, the level of protest has changed from what it initially was, right? So in the 1960s, there were initiatives to tackle the figure of black police from different avenues. Then the 1970s came along with a huge influx from people from Suriname. When Suriname fought and gained its independence from the Netherlands, people came in, and these Surinamese people were like, okay, what are you guys doing here? This needs to change. So that led to like a couple of changes, but not a complete actual tackling of it. Then in the 1980s, you had people from the Dutch Caribbean coming over, and also this conversation like, hey, what is this? So you had struggles in the 1990s, 2000s, 2008. And then with my t-shirt, what was interesting is that initially when I created my t-shirt, which said Zwarte Piet is racism, Black Piet is racism, most of my friends were like, no, no. No, 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 no. They're like, don't do that. No, don't do that. We don't talk about racism in the Netherlands. Just no, if you want to tackle it, make the sentence a bit more playful. You know, make it a limerick or something. Make it something that people could jump in with. And I was like, no. I mean, it's racism. Let's call it what it is. And that led to really interesting conversations and also interesting encounters, to the point where as I was doing this project, going to public spaces, wearing this t-shirt, just letting people approach me, that when we went to the National Parade where the figure is used and publicly televised using public money, right? Public money is used for this figure. Anyway, I'll come back to that in a second. That when we went there, we told people who had supported us all through the 6 months that we were busy with the project. And it was only 2 of us who went wearing the t-shirt in 2011, right? While all through the summer, all through the autumn, people were like, yeah, we're gonna support, keep going. And what was interesting is that 2 of us were there, 4 of us got arrested. So it was an anthropologist from Denmark who was studying the project, Siri Venning. It was a journalist, Swiss-Dutch, who got an assignment to write about a parade, but decided to write about it from the view of people contesting the figure. And it was me and another guy who was supporting the project, right? So 4 of us got arrested. And Siri Venning and Steffi Weber are 2 blonde-haired, blue-eyed women, right? And they got picked up just for being seen with us. That's 2011. 2012, I was like, screw this, I'm done. I tried to walk away twice from the project, which is interesting, right? So 2011, a whole bunch of things happened in the background because, you know, infighting. People who accuse you of having a big ego, who don't realize that the fact that they're being cut out of interviews is because there is racism on the part of the journalists. Right? Where the journalists decide, like, okay, the one who doesn't speak Dutch with a proper accent, or the one who's struggling over his words, we're going to cut him out because we only have 40 seconds, and that's the 40 seconds we're going to use, and we're going to put Quincy in there. So that kept on happening, and then people in the organization were like, okay, wait, so it's you who's telling the journalists to cut me out? I was like, dude, no. So I was like, you know what? Peace out. You go do it. That year, no one went to the parade, even though they were supposed to go to. What also happened that year is that the mayor, because the mayors of these cities organize it, every single year a different city is chosen for the public parade, for the national parade, and the mayor put up a security protocol to stop protests. So that was 2012. 2013, they went to Groningen, which is a city up north, and they had police officers dressed up in blackface, wearing machine guns during the parade to deter people from protesting. 2013. 2014, friends of mine, Mitchell Esaias, Jesse Debreu, from an organization called Kick Out Zwarte Piet, decided to go to the city that was chosen that year, that was Gouda. They went there with 2 buses. 200 people were picked up, violently just for being there. While the neo-Nazis who also announced to go and protest against their protest were left alone. Then you get 2015, 2016, exact same thing happens. And what happens as well is that after the illegal arrests, the mayors and the police officers are given a slap on the wrist because they weren't supposed to arrest them. So this happens after the fact, after they already know that what they're doing is unlawful. So there's been an escalation and a backlash towards these type of protests, towards these type of public insistences that our lives are not to be ridiculed. Right? But then the question becomes, okay, what next? How do you then circumvent these instances, or how do you use these backlashes for your own development of your thought and your pushback? And I think there is where the Netherlands is right now. Like, okay, how do you move from simple mobilization to organization?
Yeah, I can only give like the Flemish perspective because that's where I live. We haven't had those protests, and me being who I am and being an activist for the Black cause, I'm actually a little bit happy we haven't. Let me explain. I completely understand why people in the Netherlands are protesting, but I have felt in my field that behind the scenes in Flanders, things were moving. Like the changes were being made behind the scenes. We had, it all went to shit, but we once had a pact that was made behind the scenes by intelligent people of the big corporations that support the celebrations. So like the big TV networks, the big like school systems that had already said, okay, we recognize this tradition is just ridiculous and the blackface has to go. So I felt like, okay, we are doing it we don't need the public protest and the polarization because this change is already happening. But that was me before. So I was like, yay, we're so good, we're doing good. But then now a lot of companies are pulling back from the pact, and you see the shift because people are, because I think I was one of the first vocal people to say in the media. Not to say I was the first, because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, of course, but I was one of the first that was in the national media and said, this tradition is really upsetting and really wrong, and this is dehumanizing us, and it has repercussions beyond just this little party that y'all throw. And the backlash was ridiculous. People were not ready, were not prepared, and I've gotten death threats, and the craziest things happened just by me saying, please change your tradition a little bit. So that got me thinking, like maybe it is time to start protesting. It is time to start taking this to the next level, because the work behind the scenes that I was so proud of that was happening apparently is not being appreciated by the public. So I'm in a bind. I also think there's a big difference between the Netherlands and the Flemish part of Belgium, because we are just so damn polite. Like, we don't like conflict. We don't like conversation. There's no conversation about racism until someone cries their pain in a public place. Like, you have to actually show your wounds and have proof. And there's no ongoing, like, this is the only reason why sometimes I feel like in the States, the situation is so much different. You're getting killed. Like, that is a very different struggle from ours, because we're not getting killed in the streets as of now. Like, that is not happening here. I cannot relate to that, but at least the conversation about race is somewhat happening. I feel like here we're not even, like 90% of the public doesn't even understand that racism exists. We're like in the very first, not even the first step, we're like halfway in the first step. So to me it's a constant struggle to find, like, when do we speak? When do we protest? When are we going to have to be diplomatic? I find that the most difficult part of the whole change.
Word. Two things. Hold up. Two things. I got something. Do you really believe these white folks don't know they racist? I mean, like in your heart of hearts. Do you really believe that they don't understand? Because my thing is, literally, racism started here. The slave trade started here. They started it, you know, and that's such a funny thing to me. It's like, no, they may be better at it, better at concealing it. That does not mean that they don't understand. And that's a big thing I got with when I go, because I get into a room with a lot of neoliberals, because that's who want to see this movie, you know, and they want to feel like that they, you know, they're at church. And by seeing this, I was saying that earlier, that they, you know. I'm a better person because I came to see this, and it's a masochistic thing. You know, beat me up for what's been done wrong, you know, by my family or whatever. But I'm not finna give up none of this damn privilege. I'm not finna sit it down and let you have none of it. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I find it really hard to believe that white folks don't know what's going on. And that's the one thing about the United States, and that's the one thing about this president. That like people wasn't ready for, is like that he is completely honest about who he is.
That's
You feel what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and so like they doing exactly what they do in the back rooms, and they being exactly who they are. And I come from a place in America that's still in that they stuck in time. So I know what like real racist rednecks look like. It ain't like New York or LA where they figured out how to talk and speak. And, you know, and they used to cameras and stuff like that. So like, I always wonder when people like, you know, it's not like, no. Like, when I go out here, like, people still don't look me in my eyes when they talk to me. You know, and it's not, I don't know how to put it. Like, it's still the same thing. It's just like they better at it. They much more cunning with it, you know?
I don't know. I'm still wondering myself often, because I feel like in the age of information, you know, 2018, there's really no reason to be ignorant. But the people I encounter seem to be genuinely ignorant. So I find it difficult.
Maybe you have a very positive image of human beings, which
I'm a very optimistic
but
person.
I'd like to hear.
I think that it's easier to ignore race here in Europe than in the US, but because from the first day, you know, when the US was created, there have been, you know, black people being oppressed in the same, you know, in the same place. Because here in Europe, colonization and slavery took place far away. So that people, you know, can say and can act as if we were not responsible for that. And, you know, all the pictures that we have about slavery that we have in mind are related to the US. Actually, as a kid, I didn't even realize that, you know, the French overseas, because you may be familiar of the fact that France still have departments that are overseas, like in the Caribbean, Martinique, Guadeloupe, or in the Indian Ocean. And the people who live there are from, you know, enslaved people descent. And as a kid, I even didn't understood that those people came from that history. My only understanding of the slave trade was thanks to the production of the US, like Roots, like, you know, those films. We didn't have anything that could feed our imagination regarding what happened because of France, because of Belgium. So that's the reason why Europeans can act like saying, no, you know, in the US people are racist, and we're not, because we have things, you know, we can relate to something that was fed with, you know, directors, with writers. We don't even have that. And I think that France, I'm sure it's the same case in Belgium, they are in denial. And that's the reason why they can be aggressive whenever someone like you or like me try to, you know, put what happens in their face, because they have the luxury and the privilege to be able to escape to that issue, because, you know, Guadeloupe, Martinique, it's far away. It's not, you know, it's not something that you can see in your daily life. And the issue of race has been brought to Europe very recently through immigration, you know, to the European soil. So it's something that has, and the former generations, like my parents who come from Africa, they didn't have, you know, they have other concerns than, you know, going on TV to speak about race. They had to fight, you know, for their survival as immigrants. So the generation who is speaking up now is a young generation. And it's something very recent for them. We didn't have, like in the 60s, people who were able to...
So what about the Algerians? What about Baldwin writing about?
Yeah, but he was in
Algerians?
Algeria. It was not, you know, the Algerians, even
Yeah,
France.
but he was in Paris talking about how they was treating Algerians that was there, though.
It's true, but he was speaking to an American audience. No, you know, the French, what I'm saying is that the French people who were speaking about race, like Senghor, like Césaire, like Fanon, they are more celebrated out of France than in France.
Yeah.
You know, the first time I heard about Fanon, it was, you know, through the eyes of the US. Frantz Fanon in France is not that, you know, famous. If you ask someone in the street in France about Frantz Fanon, he's not famous. And even like someone like Aimé Césaire or Senghor, when he died, no prominent personality went to his funeral. You know, not the prime minister, not the president. No one went there, and it was in the early 2000s. So that tells a lot about the consideration that you have about African intellectual. And the thing is that France, for example, it was a place for refuge for the American intellectuals. So France sees itself as being much more advanced than the US because we, you know, they say, even in the 20s, in the 70s, Americans used to come to France to escape segregation. It means to them that France has never had to deal, but at the same time as they were welcoming Americans, they were oppressing African people in Africa. But they don't tell that story. And if you go to school in France, and I guess it's the same here, you learn a lot about the end of the colonization, the decolonization, but you don't learn what happened before, you know.
But you have to leave in 10 minutes. So if we have some questions for Rokhaya specifically, I think there was someone over there. I think it's Johnny, yeah? But then you have to keep it till the end, because he's staying till the end now, specifically for Rokhaya.
Can I start? Oh, okay. Thank you. My name is Dora. I'm an artist and an activist. I live in France. I'm having a very good time during this event because I've been traveling all over the world, try to solve the migrants and being an artist, that's really my job. I think there was a character in your movie was really important and it's almost invisible, which is for me the network. Because today we can say that we didn't know. And what I really like about your movie is that it's a character who's like justice. You know, it's really good that being black people you do art, because even if you don't understand the language, you don't know a culture, you can always understand art. He has to modify you in a certain way. So you are there for the truth. What I would like to say, and the new way to protest, is that there's the two policemen, the one who shot and the woman who was just doing her job. Did you think about them to be a policeman, to work, because the system is there to protect its children, all of them. If you're racist, you go to the police, to work in the police, and you're racist. That woman, she's a black woman, and she knows she's doing her job. That duality must be something really, really painful. And what I'm saying, because to have an interview just to make a show TV of that policeman was really, for me, obscene. Because he presents himself as a normal human being. I rather prefer that he presents himself as a policeman, even racist or not. I would admit that what my point is, the way they say, I will never blame a human being, I'm sorry. I will always blame the system. They keep saying, don't blame the system. The system is racist, so you make it illegal. That's it. Because here, you are there to talk about, to show an angle of the truth. You give a voice to the truth. You as an artist and all of you as a writer, it's really important that they tell their real story. But what I'm saying is that it's always between white people guilty and black people shame. I'm tired of that. That is what we have to do. If you're white, you live, if you are in the government, if you are in the system, if you have power, you should say, I don't want to live in this kind of world. So if the new protest doesn't come from white people, or don't think that it's illegal and it's not normal, we'll never end it. All over the world, it's not a question of Netherlands or France or in the States. In the States, it fails. It fails everywhere in the world. I mean, the racist is just stupid, it's bullshit. Nowadays, if you want to have a new way to protest, this has to come from the system, from the power, because it's like Obama had never been there. 1 month, now we have Trump. It's like we never have a black president. So, you know the importance of the United States, you're a reference for all over the world. I work in Africa. Most of the girls, they just want to be Beyonce or something.
Can you come to the question? Yes, please.
My question is that, don't you think that the new way to protest has to come from the system, the power?
And this question is for Rokhaya?
All of you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not sure to understand how the action can come from the system. But what is the system? You know, it's not an entity, a concrete entity, so how can the system act? But nothing will come from the institution. To me, nothing will come from the institution. It will come from the people who will be able to defy the institutions and to make the revolution for the liberation, but nothing comes from the institution because the institutions is fed by racism, by capitalism, by imperialism. So we need to defy them and to destroy what is the reason of the oppression of people of color. So I don't think that anyone in the institution can act against something that makes it an institution. That's my opinion, but I don't see how it could happen.
I really get tired, and this is no disrespect to you. You are warranted and you are granted to your own opinion. But I don't agree with the fact that people do not play a role in an institution, and that people are not cogs in a machine. Okay, so like the only reason the thing is a law is because we all agree to it. The only thing that means that something stands is because we all agree to it. And that woman that like, and I hear you, but I want to share a real personal story with you because my sister is a cop. My sister's been a cop for 25 years. Most of my life, my sister has been a police officer. Okay, my sister does not talk to me. You understand? Because I stood up for black people, and I understand because we come from a poor place, and that's a job. And my sister had children, and she had to feed those children, and so she'll put that stuff to the back to feed those children. But see, that woman in that movie is part of my family to a degree. That's not my sister, but I understand what it is to have people that stand on that side. And they collect a paycheck and they get a pension and all of that. So I don't think it's as simple as just like that. They're not to blame. Everybody makes choices in their life. You know what I mean? And we all make choices in our life. And I don't get paid a lot, and neither does she. You understand? So at least I can sleep at night. So I just really want us to really talk about the nuances in these things because police were created in America. I don't know what they were created for here, but they were created to be slave catchers where I come from. They patty rollers. They pick us up and they lock us away, and so that we can do work and all of that. Those Walmart clothes that we buy and those refrigerators and that, those are black people making those things. That's slavery. You know what I mean? And it just frustrates me when I hear people act as though though we are more powerless than other people. I agree with that. But like when you work directly for the state, you have to question what you're doing. You have to question what you're doing, and I think that's something that we all need to talk about a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is supposed to be your time.
We got one more question, only for Rokhaya, because afterwards she's leaving. So she was
Excuse
first,
me.
I think. Yeah, or
I got a question.
someone has the mic already?
Me.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for this debate. Before my question, I would like to say, in French, they say merci. Thank you very much. But that's for all of you, because Rokaya just said something. If they ask us here to name activists, we're going to name so many people we know, but from the USA, we all watch CNN and we know so many journalists in, American journalists, and we know people from BBC, and I live in Belgium. Excuse me, Dalila, I'm a friend with you on Facebook, so I know you on Facebook. That's all. Thank you. Thank you for existing. Thank you, Rokera, too. Thank you very much. It's very important for us to see you, and I think I'm a teacher, and when I started working, I understood how important it was for our Black kids to have a representation. Thank you very much. And we've all seen that with the movie, the Marvel movie and all that. So Rokhaya, you spoke about the Conseil National de Numérique, and we also had this thing that happened in France with some teachers who organized a kind of seminary with Black people to talk about, discrimination. And I saw you on TV trying to explain people that it was normal for Black people to meet among themselves to talk about what they face. Like, it happens in all communities, LGBT community, people will face domestic violence, all that. People meet together, to talk about what they face. And you tried, but okay, sometimes it doesn't work, and it's becoming very difficult for you, I think, in France to speak now. So my question is, I know it's what's next now? How do you think that with all this violence and what we know, what is going on in France and all that, how could your message still be clear, not only to us, because we like hearing things, but how could you pass the message without being seen as someone who is very violent or wants to divide the society? How could you do that? Thank you.
Thank you for your words. The feeling I have is that in France I'm very isolated, so I think that we are many to share the same views, but I am one of the few who is able to go public and to say what I think about race, about state-sponsored racism, so that makes people who share the same set as me able to say that I'm like someone that is not, whose thoughts are not shared by the majority. Even if I have been targeted by attacks because of what I said about state racism, about the right for Muslim women to wear hijab if they want to, I think that having the ability to go public, to go on TV, to have my own shows and to tell about that moves things. I am targeted by attacks, but still I have that space, and I can see that the clips of my interviews are shared a lot on social media. So that means that help people. I think that representation matters, as you said, and that probably will help other people from other generations to have it easier to do things different. For example, I could tell that even if it was difficult for her to make her movie, Amandine Gay, who is a French director, who made a movie about French women, Black French, Francophone actually, women, because there were Belgian women as well, Ouvrir la Voie, she had some space in the media to tell about how it was being a Black French-speaking woman. And that's something maybe that would not have happened years before, because before there was not Christiane Taubira, before there was not Christiane Taubira, who used to be a former Minister of Justice, who was the first Black woman to be a Minister of Justice, and who was targeted by like crazy racial slurs. But as you know, she exists now, and she's in all the minds in France, and everyone in France know that you can be a Black woman, you can be an intellectual, and you can be a Minister of Justice, which makes it easier for the next Black woman. So I think of my role as being that role, like being one of the first to be public. But then I think that for the next ones, they won't have to go through what I'm going through, because I have started to try to explain things and maybe to feed the other generations in the idea that it's possible to be on TV, to be dark-skinned, to have an African name, and to still be French, and proud of saying loudly what you think. So I'm really sorry. I think I have to go now. I have a train. I don't know why today there is no train at 10, as is the case every day. So I have to leave now. But I want to thank everyone in the panel, because it was a pleasure to meet those I don't know and to see again those I know, as Quincy, because I wrote a paper about him years ago. And thank you to the BOZAR. Thank you, Hélène. Merci beaucoup à Yoko de m'avoir invité une nouvelle fois. Et vraiment, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
So, applause. Let's scoot over a little bit. So, a lot has been said, some interesting things were said about institutions. I'd like to go to you, Nicole, because academia in itself, like all around the world, is an institution, but also the individual institutions. How can you maybe have also some response for the question that the woman asked?
Yeah, so I really think that agency matters, especially when you're in a position of power, because you have power then when you're in that position and you can do things. And it's actually within the German university system, and I will speak to that because that's the one I'm in. There is a lot that people can do, and the luxury that white people have, which is, I mean, it's also weird for me to mark that, because it's like people in that system, we don't really have diversity. So the people who are white, who are in those positions, can just ignore it. And so what some of us, it's a small group, and we're all in precarious positions too. So what we've been doing is to kind of use the tools of the field. So publications, workshops, classes, our classes, to provide students with scholarships, things like that, in order to facilitate that change. And for example, one thing that we did last year was to organize a workshop that is titled Who Can Speak and Who is Heard/Hurt? And it deals with this question that it's entirely white people who talk about black issues and racism, and that other voices are completely excluded from the conversation, systematically excluded. And it was very difficult to, because we also wanted to pay respect to people and like pay for their travel accommodation. Like we basically like asked people from all over Germany to come together in Tübingen to have this conversation, and to ask POC scholars, and it's not easy to find them, but our call for papers received a lot of traction. It was actually quite moving. And then we really wanted to pay for meals, like do the regular stuff that the boys club gets too. And we managed to do that, and we asked the boys club to attend, also to pay respect and to hear those conversations. And it was very sobering because some people canceled, and we asked them in May if they wanted to come to the conference. It was supposed to take place in January, and they told us in May they wouldn't be able to make it in January. Then we said, well, we can still move it to February. Oh, I can't make it then either. And the two people who didn't cancel right away, they canceled on the day and said something else came up. So it was, on the other hand, also a safe space, and it created like a really good network between POC scholars, of which obviously, I mean, I always have to explain that because sometimes people ask, of course we're not part, but that conversation started, and we're now publishing those proceedings, and it'll come out this year. And so we're editing, but also in that sense, editing really going over and looking if there are commas or things like that, but we're not changing ideas. And that is also something that is maybe, like a language, a tool that we could use, and people can read that, and hopefully students will read that, and we'll see that this conversation is starting. And what gives me hope, in a sense, that once it's starting, then it goes on, is like Berlin has followed up with a conversation, like with like also organizing a workshop, and like these scholars are now kind of, you know, getting together and doing their thing, and that's really good. So yeah.
So who is speaking, who is heard/hurt? Okay, so look out for that. It's a very good title, actually, yeah. So let's go into that. Who is speaking? I really want to talk about some things regarding, for example, Damien, I really love that you put Brittany on this, like, she was very visible in the film. I'm going to share a very short anecdote. I was once at a meeting in Antwerp about African community building, things like that. A lot of it was about the church. And I said there that like the people kind of, three of the founders of Black Lives Matter, because they were like always referring to Black Lives Matter, so amazing, but you know, these people come from very strict churches. That three of those founders were LGBTQ women, and like you could hear a pin drop in the room. So I'd like to like throw this out there. Why did you choose to put Brittany, like bring her into the conversation more than other characters in your film?
It was because it was the truth. It was the truth of who was out there, and it was the truth of who was in front, and it was and it was also who was gonna be open and vulnerable with people too, and let you walk around with them with a camera. And I personally was really adamant about showing Black women, and Sabaya even said at points like she like you going a little too hard, you know, like harder than me in certain situations, and that's not just because I'm sitting up here and nothing like that. Like you can ask her, but it was it just gets old after a while, seeing the same people when you standing somewhere and you watch how things unfold, and I personally went out there expecting something different. Expecting to see something different because of the stories that was told to me, and my own personal relationship to the older movement and who my father told me he was, and I wasn't out there standing out there with my dad, you know, so I don't know. But when I went out there, I saw Black women putting their asses on the line and getting beat up, and I saw queer people and gay people, and I tell you one thing, like I was a nerd my whole life, and I wasn't tough, but when it got real. And it got real ugly. Like I saw artists, and I saw queer people, and I saw women putting their asses on the line. And it was some street cats out there, but the ones that I personally grew up with wasn't standing out there banging the way they talk about. You know, the ones that I grew up with. You know what I'm saying? But it was all of the people that you threw away. It was the people with the tats on their face and the 5 felonies, like them niggas that lived out there, that lived in Ferguson. They was out there, you know what I mean? Like and they like it just wasn't the suits and the ties and the bean pies and the bow ties, you know. And so some of them was out, you know, a very select few, but it didn't. Brother Malcolm. You know, another thing, another real thing, you know, like, and I don't know what y'all get over here, but Brother Malcolm was a spokesman. That is speak, I talk, you know. Martin Luther King was the one that was out every day in the shit, getting stuff thrown at him and getting locked up and getting beat up. You know what I mean? And we sanitized the legacy of Dr. King, but Dr. King was a real radical, and that's why we chose that quote, The riot is the language that they unheard. That's a part that we don't get to hear about Dr. King. We get a whole new story. Now, the same thing when I went to South Africa and I learned what Mandela really was to the South African people. He ain't what we hear about. And same thing with Obama. We can have a conversation about Obama when we leave here if y'all really want to talk about him. You know what I'm saying? Like it ain't. We get these stories told to us about these Black men in particular. And we rarely get the story of the women and just these other narratives of different types of people that are black. Black does not, like gay people come in black, women come in black, you know, and we never, you know, you get that cut, like they get, and that model too, you get that model of black too, you know what I mean? And we never get those. So it was very important to tell a new story and a whole story, as whole as we could possibly get across. And so I'm lucky enough to have somebody else that wanted to partner with me, that wanted to do that. And it taught me a lot about myself and the things that I didn't realize that I was doing too, you know? So, yeah, it was just very important to just tell the story the way we saw it. And that's what we try to do.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised that it was the black women in particular and the LGBTQ people, and because I feel I feel always awkward talking about this when there's a white person very close to me, but there's a sort of, sorry, we've met, I like her, but there's a sort of fragility where people who have never been the victim of certain things are just a lot more fragile. Like, for example, when Me Too broke out last year, the whole Me Too movement, all my white friends, I have a lot of white friends, like very close girlfriends, they were talking about their experiences, and I was so happy, and it was like a great feminist movement. And it made it clear for some of them, for the first time, that as a black woman, you get all of that, because you're a woman. But then you get the extra sauce of racism on top of that. So that makes a great Sunday. So, you know, you get taught to be harder from the get-go. You get taught to fight against things just existing, and I think it's the same for LGBTQ people. Like you get your color or whatever your personal issues are, and on top of that you get the racism. So I'm not surprised that it's those that are the most oppressed that are leading the charge, because they're hardened, they know, and they expect the backlash, and they're not startled by it because we're used to that. And I think it's interesting to me to see how, especially in the States, black women are really leading the charge. It's not only in Black Lives Matter, but like even politically, they're the ones taking control, and I'm glad, because they seem to be the ones that have the most sense.
So, but, yeah. Say it. No, Chrissy, you actually said, I want to talk about toxic masculinity. I want to talk about it, and you said it, bum. It was like in bold and everything. Talk about it. Speak on it.
Well, I think it comes back to what was just said in terms of hypervisibility of certain figures and movements, right? And also the notion of egos. So when you think about egos in these agenda-setting movements, it becomes this weird cocktail of where you're wondering, like, why are you doing this then? Are you here for your own gain, or are you here for actual change? And then you start to think not just about the movement itself, but then you start to think about the grander scale of it all, about politicians, about NGOs, about people who are in situations in which the actual solving of the issue will lead to their loss of jobs, and then they don't actually solve the issue. And then for me, it was always this idea, like, whatever I do, I need to become obsolete, right? Because if I become obsolete, then what I set out to do has been achieved. And I think that's something that always needs to come back in what we try to do when thinking about protests as well. Like, okay, if you're the one protesting, if you're the one leading a charge, you need to make sure that after you inspire 4, 5, 6 people, that they lead on the charge after you. That you're not the one constantly up in the forefront. Because that will lead, and I think that happened in the Netherlands a lot of times, to these figureheads that are seen as the ones leading it, while or when they stop, the whole thing falls apart. So I made sure in what I did to let everyone know from the get-go, like, yeah, that thing of activist there, that isn't me. I'm the artist. I'm the big mouth. I'm the one who can support other people. I'm the one who can come up with an idea. But the ones you need to be talking to is Ramona Snow, is these other people, is Simone Zeevack, are these names, these people who you've probably not heard about, but they're the ones who are organizing, they're the ones who are working with undocumented people, they're the ones who are actually in the trenches, right? And I think that issue of being in the trenches and what that does to you and how you then think about it from your own male perspective is also really important. And I think for me, what happened when I started doing gender studies at the University of Utrecht, you know, the world-class gender studies department there with Gloria Wecker and all these people, is it shifted my perspective. Also coming from the Caribbean, right? You're taught certain roles. Gender is performative, and once you figure that out, once you know what comes along with it, you also realize in situations like these, like, okay, when should I speak? When should I not speak? When should I stop? When should I leave the floor open? All these type of issues. So toxic masculinity and being aware of that is extremely important.
Well, you can still study it, doesn't mean you're going to practice it. That's something we all know. So I want to kind of get into a little bit of the more technical parts of how movements work. So Black Lives Matter is very decentralized, as if I understand correctly. Also here in Belgium, things are very decentralized, also because we have French-speaking, Flemish-speaking parts. And I mean, we've talked about this before, this idea like we need to all band together, we need to all work together. Is that gonna work though? And is it worth putting in all that energy? Aren't we more effective if we're working on different fronts? I don't know anymore. Like, and also people in the room, you can give some input as well if you feel like
it. My name is Joël Capompolé. I was the first black senator in Belgium, and I am the first black member of the Walloon Region Parliament. And I'm really happy to be here and to be part of this this conversation, because for me as a politician, as a black woman politician, it's not always easy to find the right position to be with my community, and in the same times to have a lot of activities with old Belgian people and to feel the way to connect people, because for me it's better to have the human community. And I have perhaps one question, because some of you said that representation matters, and for me it's right. And for example, I would like to know what's your point of view about a movie like Black Panther from the famous Marvel comic strip, because it's a movie from the major company showing black actors, black actresses, talented, famous. And is it the right way to build a better society, a better world? Is it really relevant to have this kind of movie? I think it's really interesting, but I would like to have your point of view about it, because...
Okay, so can we keep that question?
Yes.
And maybe go into... I thought you were going to respond to what I said. So maybe we can keep that question for like in 5 minutes. I just want to hear a little bit about what you guys think about centralization, decentralization of movements.
So I guess for me, in the U.S., I think sometimes it's a generational question. When people, that's what it turns into, about like who's the leader, what are your demands and things of that nature. But then when I talk to people that live through, like again, my parents are pretty old. They let me know that they didn't have it together either. And so it's really easy in hindsight to judge people, especially with the social media and the internet. You get information a lot quicker now. So if there was somebody with a cell phone standing next to Martin Luther King and right before the boycotts, he probably was scared out of his mind and didn't know what he wanted to do either, but he rolled with it. He was, 24 years old? And we forget about how young these people were when they were leading these things. So I agree with decentralization, because the enemy doesn't know what you're doing. And I don't think that everybody's idea of freedom is different. You know what I mean? And I don't think that you need everybody. We shouldn't agree on one thing, because that's the problem right now, is that everybody's going with one idea of who should be in front and what is normal. And I think that everybody has a different idea of what freedom is. So I think that's what we should. I'm much more about, I don't think equality is, I don't want equality, I want power. And I want freedom to be who I am. I don't want to be equal to white men.
I feel you, but I sort of disagree in the sense that I think what you were talking about Belgium, for me, the decentralization, the fact that we're not united as black people in Belgium is very debilitating. It stumps my struggle, because I am often put away as, you're just the one that cares about that one thing. Like, you're just a victim and you're annoyed by certain things, or you had a racist experience. And I'm like, no, we all did. We all did. We're all freaking fed up, but we're not together. And I can't get, sometimes there's strength in numbers. And to me, that's lacking a little bit. I really search for input, and I don't want to be that figurehead that you were talking about. I don't like being the figurehead. And the media, as you all know, they just decided a few years back from, okay, like, we need a black person because it's getting ridiculous now. So we got room for one. So now I have to be like the spokesperson on all subjects. And I'm like, no, like, the door's open, so I'm trying to get everyone in as soon as possible. So every time I get a question and I'm not available, or I don't really know it, or it's not my subject, I try to get another black person to take my spot. But the media is very reluctant to do that, because they still have this fixed idea that we're all the same person, and that we all think alike, and that we all have the same concerns. And I would like us to be more united and to have more of a structure or an organization just to build that power. Because I want the power too. I want the power to be myself. I want the power to be free, but we're not there yet. And being as divided as we are right now is holding us back, I feel.
I think in the Dutch context, it's interesting to see this notion between centralization and decentralization. Sorry, there are pockets of you could say connections, that people are aware of what the others are doing, but that doesn't mean that we're all being led, right, by the same type of ideas. I think what the importance is for decentralization or centralization is that we don't step in front of the others. Right? Because I think that happens a lot as well. When someone's doing something, and instead of letting them just do it, you step in front and be like, no, you're doing it wrong. I'm like, no, let's just keep it going, because there's space to do 10,000 different things. Also, the idea that we have to use the same tactics is something that I don't agree with. I think it needs to be this notion of fights on several fronts, right? Because we're not, I think Audre Lorde said we're not single issue people, right? We live multiple issue lives. So in that sense, it's also about figuring out, okay, what are the different fronts that people can tackle issues from? And we shouldn't just think about one front. Protest on the street is one front. Protest here in BOZAR via this film is another front. Protest via the newspaper articles, via an op-ed is another front. Protest via academia by creating space is another front. So these are different fronts that we can talk about and we can see at, but it doesn't mean that all of us need to be centrally planned to do what we're going to do. And I think thinking about the central planning is also thinking of we're trying to control each other in what we're doing and how we're doing it. If I want to say something like Black Peter's racism, and my friends don't agree, it could have stopped me from getting to this point, kicking open the door.
Yeah, and I think an important issue is as well is if you are centralizing, you're including. When you include, you always exclude. You always push people out. When you create a group, you're always like putting a parameter somewhere. And that parameter has been put on the backs of, for example, women and LGBTQI. So I think that's also something very important to think about. But I think this is a good time to put this to the audience, if someone has like to respond on this issue specifically.
Just a moment. Hélène, yes, it's me, Joël. I would like to say to Dalila that we can try to build this kind of association in Belgium, because you are in Flanders, I am in Wallonia, and why not? It's a proposition. I would like to build this with you.
Can I ask the question on that front? Can I ask the question? Why, who are we centralizing for, too? That's my question, too. Because if we centralizing just for the way white people look at us, then I'm not on that either. Just because they want to, like, we need a black person to come. We shouldn't be talking to them sometime. I just think, like, we put so much of our energy into being presentable for them and for them to think that we people and for all of that. And I think maybe we should just be talking to each other sometimes. And yeah, that's just a question for that. Who are we centralizing for?
So, anyone else?
I do. Hi. So, what's up? I do have some points, so it's going to be tough love. I know a few of you. What's up? I heard some things that I don't agree with, especially about the situation in Belgium. I know that you, Dalila, chose the way of not putting out the sufferance first and bringing the message out with a smile. And like you're saying now, like, oh, that is not working. But I really disagree with the fact that people are not dying here. Black people are dying, refugees are dying in the streets of Brussels, in the parks. The government is not taking the responsibility as they should. So I really, it kind of hurts when I hear you say that, like on a personal level, because 2 weeks ago we were dealing with Globaroma where they took on the refugees. And that's just the last part that we heard, because that's Globaroma is led by white directors, white people. There were like 1,600 other razzias in Molenbeek with Arab people, black people. So people are being persecuted and arrested and killed. We don't know about. Every now and then I do hear about kids getting beat to death, and we just don't hear about it. And then on another side, I also really want to comment on the fact that there have been a lot of activists in Belgium doing the work for a long time. And it's true that we don't know their names. We're working on projects to get them on Wikipedia because people need to know and find out about these people. And if we don't write our own history, it won't get out there. But I just really, it's a frustration of mine. And hearing this in this institute, that people are not connected. They are, but they're also just trying to survive. And there are a lot of movements you might not have heard about in Brussels, even in Antwerp, in Ghent. And I mean, I don't know if it's a question, but more of a remark that I feel that in this institute, especially here, needs to be said, that there's a lot of work and people not being invited to conversations here because they're too radical. So I do see with your new book how you've been inviting other writers and Zwart, and I appreciate, I'm a fan. But there are a lot of voices that are being silenced because they're just too radical, not invited to TVs, not invited to these debates, that are not welcome in these buildings, and we still need to talk about them too. So that's what I wanted to say.
Can I comment? I want to comment. First of all, because I know and love you, and you're one of my best friends, so that's some tough love. No, on the first issue, you're very right. I made a mistake, and because we actually were talking about this right before we got on stage, about the fact that there are people dying and that we do have a mass grave in the Mediterranean, and all of Europe is looking at it. And so I apologize. I don't have an excuse for that. That was just... to me, that's a different conversation, but it's not. It's the same conversation, so I apologize because I do recognize those deaths and that pain, and I do see it. It's just not as in your face as it is in this movie, as it is in the whole, you know, in the US, it's the police shooting down people in the streets. Here it's more subtle, but they're doing the same thing, so I recognize that, I apologize. The second part, I was trying to portray, maybe I didn't do it well enough, but I did say, like, I realize I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and I do see all of the work that's being done all around me, and that has been done before me, and I actually sometimes resent the fact that I'm the figurehead, and that I have become this voice of, that is just, I'm just the one that happened to get through the door. And this is what I was talking about. I'm holding open the door. I'm trying to get everyone in because I feel like it's undeserved at times. And I feel like there's a lot of people that don't get the shine that they deserve and that don't get their voices heard. I just am really struggling. And this is also part of a racist system. Is the media is also part of that racist system. I find it very difficult to know when to draw that line, like where do I get in the conversation because I want at least some person of color in the conversation, and when do I step out because it's not my place. It's a very thin line, and I have to think about that all the time, which is something that a white person genuinely does not have to do. So it's all part of that system, and thank you for pointing it out, and I'm sorry I made that mistake. Am I radicalizing? No, in my head and the way I've been doing what I'm doing, I've never changed. I was always as radical or not radical as I was. I've never changed my message. The only thing I changed at a certain point was the outlets, because I wanted to get a bigger audience. So when I got the chance to do like a TV quiz or to be in the spotlight somewhere else, I took those chances, but I never changed my message. The only thing I am doing now is, now that I've gotten the podium, I'm becoming louder, because I feel like, okay, so now y'all like me? Let me talk about all these issues. So in the eyes of some people, I'm radicalizing, but I've never been not radical. To me, my message hasn't changed. It's been amplified because of the chances I've gotten, some warranted, some not. But the message has been amplified. That's basically it.
Yeah, so I just I was thinking about less about centralization, more about hegemony, and think America is great at commodifying everything, including activism, and that's why we get this stream of I guess an American mood that spreads out throughout everything else that we do in Europe. And I just wonder, I'm super impressed with the work that Quincy's doing and the work of the Black Archives in Amsterdam, and how you're working to uncover stories of Black Marxism and socialism, and Otto and Hermina Huiswold, you know, and the work that you're doing there, uncovering these stories that were forgotten because they weren't commodified and you can't buy a T-shirt. And so I just wonder, yeah, how you went about uncovering those stories, and where you get inspiration to try and create I guess a Black European movement.
The Black Archives, that's a project by Mitchell Isaias and Jesse Debreu from the New Urban Collective. So we need to give them a shout out. That's not necessarily my work. The only thing I did is I was part of the creative artistic group for Association Our Suriname, which has a building which they bought in the 1990s for a guilder, which is interesting, right? When you think about how you're able to buy buildings now and how it's become this neoliberal market, and Amsterdam is completely full and all this kind of stuff. But in the 1990s, they were able to buy this building, and that's why they're still in it, right? If else, it would have been defunded and gone away. But this association has existed since 1919. So next year, it's 100 years. It'll be the oldest organization led by people of color in the Netherlands, which is a fact that is not that known in the rest of the country. And one of the reasons why it's been able to keep going, it's because it's been independent, not financed by subsidies. It's been a member-led organization. So when I was invited to work with them, I started digging around in their archives. I started digging around and trying to figure out, okay, what are the type of things I could do in this organization, this situation. And there the idea of this intergenerational connection, intergenerational knowledge production came into being. What also happened in the same period is that I was connected to the Black Europe Body Politics Conference. And that's a conference that's held every 2 years, partly in Berlin and then sometimes in Copenhagen, and this year we're going to London. So it's London and Berlin. And what this 2-year biennial conference has done, which was set up and led by Alana Lockwood, a curator from the Dominican Republic, is that it's been pushing and trying to connect all these different ways of being black within a European context, right? Because when we think about blackness, we think about a commodified version that's been coming over for decades, even when thinking about who our leaders were and what people have been doing, right? So I love the intervention yesterday by Omar Bar when he was mentioning all these European black thinkers, even when thinking of a figure like Pushkin, right, the Russian writer. How many people know that he was, you know, of African descent, which is like fascinating. Exactly. Exactly, right? And that's been glossed over, just taken out. So my inspiration comes from these conversations with people who are close to me, and also trying to figure out, okay, what is my next understanding of what I want to do? So I've been really interested in decolonial knowledge production. And with decolonial knowledge production, I mean looking at historical situations from a different perspective. So I'm doing a performance on the 19th of May here in Brussels at, I think, in INAS, the art school, and INSIS, Assas, okay. Okay. Whatever. And I'm gonna be connecting Leuven, 1968, to Detroit, 1967, to Kinshasa, 1960. Because there are connections in between them that people have glossed over or not talking about. And I think that's the work that I find really meaningful at the moment. Trying to figure out what are the silence narratives that we could bring out and talk about this global movement for liberation.
Yeah.
Can I add one thing?
I have a question.
No, but he wants to statement one
Yeah,
and then he has been with the mic for like a very long time, so he's going first.
My bad, homie. I just got one thing, man. You know, and we keep saying this word commodity around black culture from America. And I just want everybody to really understand that we was brought over as slaves, right? So we literally commodities. So and the machine that we come from is the machine of the greatest capitalist machine of all time. So the reason you see us the most is because that black people, nothing that we have ever made has been owned by us. And they take it and they sell it back to you and us too, over and over again. So when we talk about T-shirts of Brother Malcolm, yeah, we own those T-shirts too, but it's not all, we not in control of that all the time. So people pick and choose what parts of us they want to sell back to everybody. And we had this conversation earlier about I didn't know how Black Panther was felt in other people in other countries and how African culture is being used in that movie. But that's because we not connected to our culture, and we not like where you can go back to where you come from because of immigration and slavery are two different things, and like we don't have those connections. So it's always. I just want to really speak on that nuance of like, I understand what role I play, and for once in forever, we get to control what you get sold to. So like at least they're like somebody that's actually from there and actually lived that shit in Ferguson gets to bring it to you, but like usually that don't happen. And so I just want to bring that up is that like, yeah, we like it is being commodified, but it's usually some white man collecting all the chips on my back and my soul. So, yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Eric. On the point of being radical, going the extra step, and also of wanting power and not equality, I just wanted to touch on not the form, but maybe the what we should be protesting for next, because I understand that for something I actually do want equality, to the point that last I checked, it's still my coins that I work for who go into those taxes to pay those people who are, instead of protecting and serving me as they should be saying, are like out here harassing us and killing us. So yeah, on that point, I want equality in the eyes of the law, because I'm paying for it. Like, I'm breaking my back paying for it, and but I was inspired again by an American figure again. He's more current. Is Wes Bellamy, the vice mayor from Charlottesville, who went on TV and said, "Yeah, thank you for equality, but we don't want those. We don't want that shit. What we want is a power, but in the form of equity, because I don't see how we gonna be, even if they say, yeah, you human, you good, how we gonna get to be as great as we want to if Wouter or Benjamin, those are very like white names for like people in Flanders or Wallonia, get to start being mediocre but getting all the body resources, while Yusra or Binta in Brussels, in schools that don't even get to teach her or don't even give her a chance to do anything she wants. And how we gonna get anywhere if they just say like, oh, okay, kumbaya, we all equal now, but at the same time don't do anything to make us start from the same point. So I just want to know because that's what I believe, and I hope that's what everybody here believes, how do we inspire people to stop praying for niblets and asking for equality when we should be out here stomping our foot asking for equity? So how do we get people to do that?
I immediately have to think about the Somali-Canadian writer Sarah Hagi, who has coined the phrase, "I want the same type of confidence as a mediocre white man." I think that's really, really interesting, right? Because it's also this notion of what type of confidence do you have, and how do you see yourself in relation towards your own ambitions, not just the opportunities that supposedly are afforded to you, right? And I think there it's also this notion of trying to understand the system that you're in and finding the loopholes within that system to break it apart. One of the interesting things that happened in my case that was able to push me into this direction was that I had this upper class education, right? People saw that I went to university. People thought, okay, he's like one of us. He sees this system as normal. And then what happens when you get to the table, you're able to break the table.
Can I ask my question? Oh, hi, much love for all of you.
Hi.
Hi. Ellie, thank you for your remark. So 2018 marks the 20th anniversary of the death of Samira Adamu, who was killed by 2 Belgian police officers on a deportation flight. This happened in 1998. No one in Belgium, except for a few people, know her name. She was killed. People are still being killed today in Belgium. This is happening. Mostly refugees, mostly people that are not educated, that don't have financial security, that don't come to talks like these. We in this room, all of us, we're privileged. We're privileged to be here. We're privileged to be invited to these talks. Refugees sleeping outside, not far from here, they don't have those privileges. So how do we fight for the rights of refugees without being patronizing, without reproducing the same paternalistic attitude that, you know, these institutions have towards us? And how do we include them in these conversations? Where are they?
I won't be able to tackle that one because it's I don't know. I think we're all still thinking about this, and we're all searching for that answer. You know, Mila, I was born in Rwanda. I was adopted when I was 2, but most of my biological family came after. So they were refugees that fled the genocide, and I've lost a lot of family members, but I also managed to keep some, so they all live in Belgium, and they tell me their stories about being refugees back in 94, 95, and it's horrifying, and it's upsetting, and back then the climate was even better than it is today, in the sense that they faced hatred and violence and difficulty getting here, but now we have a political climate that is so hostile, that they're so dehumanized. It's ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous now, because they're not even looked at as human anymore. So I honestly don't know, and I find that the most difficult question in this whole the whole movement we're building is, how do we get those black and brown lives, how do we save them, how do we give them a voice, how do we include them? I don't even know, because I feel like even us, the privileged ones in this room, the ones that have gotten all those opportunities, that had education, that speak several languages, that are invited to these spaces, even we are fighting to be seen as human. So I don't know where to begin, and it's overwhelming and it's scary, and I don't know how to answer your question.
I don't either. I don't know if someone else in the audience can. But also, let's not forget that a lot of the people in this audience are the children of refugees.
I'm one of them.
You are, of course, one of them, as I know. The people sitting here are children of refugees. I also have no answer to your question, but I will never forget Samira Adamu. It really, I remember that day when it was on the television. I remember every single thing about it. I will not forget people who are dying in the oceans either. I will not forget what happens in Libya. But at the same time, and that's something I think is very important, is we need to make sure that we're still here in 10 years. We need to make sure that we don't burn out. And I don't think we have to try and make space for everyone, yes, but we don't have to take on everything, because we're not able to, and also we cannot speak for other people. Do you get what does that make sense? Because
why not ask the refugees what they need?
Yeah.
Like, maybe that's a question. Maybe that ain't the question for this here. Maybe you should, like, when you say they right outside, like, ask them what they need and give it to them. Because I know it's like it's poor black people where I come from. I come from poor black people. Like, and instead of me talking about education and all that shit, you know, like, the people that don't live in those worlds love to tell us what we need instead of asking people what they need. So maybe that's what it is. Just ask them what they want and what they need.
Okay. Two ladies over there.
Yeah, so my question came, Helene, you just mentioned burnout. I guess for you guys up there, how do you take care of yourselves? I mean, Damon, you seem pretty annoyed about the word self-care. And I know, I'm interested generally why you said that. I'm also really exhausted explaining racism to white people. So just how do you cope with it?
So the people in front are saying quit.
Maybe, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm taking up too much time. For me personally, I have 3 very small children. So my oldest is 5, then I have a daughter that's 3, and I have a daughter that's 7 months old. So I'm busy all the time and I don't sleep. So burnout is always around the corner. I have good friends, like the one that gave me the tough love right there, that tells me every now and again, stop. So it's a danger. It's actually something I have to think about. Like I was telling people like tomorrow I'm going in front of an audience that's probably not as responsive as you guys are. I speak in front of very wide audiences most of the time, explaining things that are very normal to me, and I have to explain them in very small steps, and it's a frustrating thing. So I'm in therapy. Hallelujah for therapy. We all need it. Just to keep my head. And I take breaks every now and again. That's why I can, like, I see the most, sometimes when I see something very offensive pass, I'm just like, I pass it on to the next. Like, Helene has gotten some of my bullshit, because I'm like, I can't deal with this today. So I have to like think about self-care, because I don't want to burn out, and I want to be a good mom to my kids, and I want to be able to do the things I do. So yeah, it's therapy, taking a lot of time off, finding the right balance between wine and coffee for me. So, you know, I do stuff to keep my head, because otherwise I would go insane.
Yeah, for me, it's like, it's keeping perspective, you know, not to just keep the door open or being more inclusive for my students, but also really making sure they're okay, like that I ask them how they're doing, and, you know, not just talk about like the negative stuff, but also uplifting experiences, like what kept you going this week, what was good, things like that. I'm not worried about myself in that sense. I sometimes throw things because I get angry. Because I get laughed at, but that's like narcissistic stuff. That's really, that's that. But with my students and my colleagues that are working with me now, I just want to make sure that they can be around, and that they know they have me as a friend to vent to sometimes. Sometimes it's just that, to open the door and be like, ugh, and then go on. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I'm down with therapy too now. After talking to a lot of people, that's not something that is frowned upon where I come from, and it took a long time for me to get into that. But that's something that I do, and the reason I get frustrated with the term self-care is because, yeah, I don't know how else to put it, but the people that always throw that word around ain't the ones usually getting shot at, you know? And they not the ones that's doing bids and coming out and shit like that. And it just feels like a very academic term, like self-care and safe space. And it ain't no safe spaces for a lot of the people that I know. And it ain't never safe. And I agree. I'm very privileged to be like, I done went all over the world to talk about this, and it puts a toll on me, because I got to talk about something over and over again and relive pain over and over again in front of a bunch of people that I don't know. But it's still better than my cousin that smoke crack. It's still better than like people I done lost, you know. So that's why I don't know if that's why it's a tightrope when I hear self-care, you know. It ain't I don't know how to deal with it, because I don't know if I just carry a lot of guilt around the fact that I get to do shit that most people don't get to do. And so it ain't necessarily the greatest thing in the world, but it's still something that a lot of people that I know don't get to do. So I don't know if I need to be doing self-care as much as, you know, when my family dying of cancer, and you know, they carrying diabetes and all that, they got that. And so it's like, yeah, it's just a sticky situation when I hear self-care in situations, because I don't know if those people that's saying it, it feel like they pretty much care for a lot of times when I hear that.
I watch a lot of TV. I think that's, and I have I have people who love me, and I think for me it's around being around them. Yeah, and also, I mean, if you ever get a chance, try and get invited to Dory's, because she cooks a mean meal.
I want to quickly respond to, I guess I understand where you're coming from, and we talked about it before with the whole like hashtag self-care, blah, blah, blah. It's become like almost a non-term. But at the same time, I think that it is very important in communities like ours that have a lot of trauma and have a lot of stigma around taking care of yourself and trauma, that I don't really mind it becoming a fashionable thing, because if that only convinces one person to go see a shrink or whatever, then that's something. Like, I come from a Rwandese background. We are, I don't know if I can say that, but the most Rwandese people I know, we have gone through a lot. And I think so. If some like lifestyle guru keeps saying self-care, and that only convinces a few people to go and find help, then that's like good enough for me, for sure. And also, I watch a lot of television, and I drink a lot of red wine with, for example, Melat, one of my very good friends. Yeah. So yeah, there was the new, yeah, and then you. Oh yeah, she has, okay, sorry. First you, then the lady in the back, and then you, sir. And then I think we're gonna have to finish, yeah.
Well, yesterday we had a talk about Black History Month, and I mentioned, I said, well, history in Belgium especially, but everywhere, has been purposefully bleached. So people of African descent, women, LGBTQI+, and well, anyone who's not a straight, cisgendered man, white man, basically, have been put out of the narrative. And also, I think that for a lot of people, a lot of black people in Belgium who haven't grown up in Brussels, for example, or around family, who have been adopted, a lot of us have grown up as what my dad calls a fly in the bowl of milk.
Oh yeah, that's such a great term to describe my life.
It's an amazing way to put it, but basically we are usually the token black guy, the token black girl, we are the black one. And so, yes, it's exhausting, and we keep explaining that I have a blonde aunt that told me really seriously a couple of months ago that racism didn't exist anymore in Belgium. And that is basically our everyday life. And we don't have, most of the time it's really hard to find other black people and connect. And we're talking about centralizing, and I do agree with you guys, and centralizing we shouldn't have an homogeneous form of activism, but I think we all need connection. And I'm wondering, couldn't we use social media? Let's go with technology, let's use their weapon. Let's go with it. Why couldn't we have this kind of hashtag or something, because let's be trendy, to have all these resources, because you guys talk about people doing amazing things. You talk about intellectuals. We talk about all these people I have never heard of, and I'm an historian, and we are talking about historical figures. I heard about Frantz Fanon and so many other people like 2 years ago. And it's time that we could have this kind of database. You were talking about Wikipedia, making Wikipedia pages. That's amazing. And we need something to connect all this. So black people everywhere who are sometimes isolated know that they are not crazy, because they will convince you that racism doesn't exist and that you are self-pitying. And then you realize at 26-year-old that actually you've been a victim your whole life. And you don't want to be a victim, but that's the fact. So how do we unite? Could we unite? Let's unite.
I just want to quickly say, because I gather you're also adopted?
No, I'm not adopted. It's just that I was the only black person in a village of 200 white guys.
We sort of have the same kind of background.
Yeah, of course.
To me, there are already certain groups on Facebook, like the hidden groups. There's sometimes some bullshit in them, let's be honest. But there's a lot of bullshit in them, I'm going to be honest. But there's also a lot of exchange of thought and of... I've learned a lot, let's say that. We have New Awoken African Generation, which is a group with about 2,500 members, which is people from the Netherlands and Belgium. Then you have Black Girls Club NL, is also a Facebook group which has 9,000 women from the Netherlands and Belgium. I know it's just small things, but to me it helps a lot, and it's where I will post things I write on those groups first, to just to get the feel of what other Black people think. And so I think we're already organizing, so maybe we should just exchange more about the things that are already existing and not try to invent more, because then we just keep making the same little initiatives. But I agree with you. We should connect, not in a centralized, we don't need a leadership and a structure, and we don't need, I don't think, a whole organization, but just exchange has helped me tremendously. So yeah, I agree.
Hello, I'm Edwin, and I want to touch on something that the previous question kind of almost addressed, which is the question of Black history, because there's a lot of Black history that isn't told. For example, the fact that even when Christopher Columbus went to America, he was told that black-skinned people had been to America. And if you go to South America, the Mayan traditions have sculptures and history from African nations, which shows that Africans have been traveling for generations. And even in the Caribbean, they have, actually Christopher Columbus took back spears which had golden tips to Spain and to Portugal from these people who had come before him. And he actually had evidence of this, which he took back as evidence. And I'm wondering how we can use this history and really tap into it. Because, for example, in Europe, the Moors ruled Europe for over 800 years, which I'm sure a lot of people in this room know. You go to museums, galleries, and the only images of Black people you see are of us being depicted as slaves, which shows that this is the only image of a Black person that institutions want to pass down to future generations. Meanwhile, that's not the only image of a Black person. So I'm wondering, why aren't we talking about this history? Tens of thousands of years of history. You go all the way back to Egypt. You know, there are remnants of Afro combs that are 5,000 years old. Combs. This didn't start in the 80s. And then all of a sudden, poets that are thousands of years old. So I'm wondering, what is the value of Black history in sort of reiterating these stories? And how important is a Black History Month or these things to...
Maybe it's an idea to also take the other two questions at the same time, and then we'll wrap up with all the answers.
Thank you. I just want to bring back the international dimension in the conversation. I think we can't escape to talk about foreign policy. And I think your film, Damon, hints at that a lot. I see that I know that there were solidarity from different movements in the world, including from Palestine. And I've been following that, and it was very, very moving and impressive the way that worked out. And a lot of the weaponry also that we see was tested and used in many other countries through different wars. And I think we cannot escape being aware of what's going on, of armed conflict around the world. So I was wondering if these relationships between Ferguson and other movements in the world have maintained, and if you were able to keep up with them.
Okay. There's this gentleman there, that's the last question.
Good evening, everyone. I would like first to start off by thanking the whole panel. I wasn't expecting such an enriching evening, so I really would like to thank everyone for each interaction, especially the panel members. One of the key points for me from this evening is that struggles are interconnected. Like we beautifully saw in the movie how Britney opened up about her relationship and when she got married, and then you see that there is also the struggle of the LGBTQI people and the Black people, and that all these struggles actually have a transcending objective, which is to unify all those people who are struggling for their right to be who they are. And I think that we shouldn't forget this point, that all these struggles actually have this point in common. So I think that if we can unite the different struggles, that we can create synergies that we can achieve rather than having everyone battling on his own field and not seeing that it's all about the same thing. fighting for basic rights, human dignity. So I think that's on the underlying principles that we should unite it. And there were also some feedback about when do we get the opportunity, what do we get to do? I think that we have to start thinking about what we can do on our personal level and not wait till we get the opportunity. And so what I do, for example, I'm a researcher myself, and so what for me is very important is to reflect the diversity that we have, also for my students. What I do is that I incorporate the diversity that I see here in Brussels and put it into practice. And so my question was actually for Nicole very specifically, and maybe also for Quincy, is that how do you deal with diversity to get the representation of the people who are going to schools, to academia, and to make sure that there is a change not only bottom up, but also top down, because I think that the diversity has to meet both ends, both the students, for example, coming to university, but also the researchers, the university professors, the administration, sorry. And so just in a general term, to have the institutions reflect this hyper-diverse reality of our society.
Yeah. Okay, so I suggest maybe, Damon, you can answer the specific question first from the lady, and then we can go into the other one.
Okay. As far as solidarity is concerned, yeah, that was very intentional. I met a lot of Palestinian activists throughout this situation, and we were very much paying attention to what was going on in Palestine, in Egypt, in China. Like, all those things happened at the same time, because I think everybody figured out that social media was the way. And that leads me to another thing. So when we talk about using social media to connect, from somebody that watch yourself with that, because you can see it and so can they ass. And they are watching everything that you do. So just be clear about what you, be careful about what you put up there, because I watched it turn around on people. And I watched it also used as like a COINTELPRO tool, almost to turn people against each other. And firsthand, yeah, firsthand. So just watch that. But I do think that I still keep in touch with a lot of Palestinian activists, and I still, me personally, I still watch what's going on in the world, and people still, the same way that people shared information with us, people still reach out to, I guess, figures that kind of got propelled for help too. So I do agree with you. I think that there is an overarching unity that needs to happen, and I think it is happening. And I think it's happening in the right way, because it's not being telegraphed and televised to a degree that will put us all in danger. So, yeah.
I want to answer really quickly on your question about history. I think there's a very good reason why we're not taught this history, and that is because history is power. History is written by the powerful. And that is why we are not taught this history. This is the case today. That has been the case throughout all of history. So I think, yeah, a lot of this is about that. But there's a lot of people in academia, in schools, trying to do that work. That is happening. What I know from Belgium specifically. But it's a long. Yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's going to be a long time. And I always say we're very late with this. It's not 10 before 12, it's 12:30 already, but that doesn't really matter to the people in the institutions, of course. So, yeah. Maybe someone else has to...
No, I can only agree with what you're saying. To me, that is one of the things that I find the most mind-boggling living in this country, is the fact that we don't know our own history. Belgians, and I consider myself as a Belgian. I'm adopted. I was raised here. I found out that Rwanda, the country of my birth, was a colony of Belgium, and how Belgium was directly responsible for the genocide. I found that out when I was 25 years old, and when I was in Kigali, because they know their history, but we don't. It's ridiculous. It's insane. The fact that there are statues celebrating a mass murderer who has killed more people than Hitler in the streets, to me, is pure insanity. So yes, there's a great big gap in our history, and for some reason, and I think we all know the reason, they want to keep that gap, and I think it's up to to us and to people in academia and to teachers to try and close that gap. But it's not easy. For example, my husband, who happens to be a white Flemish dude, is a teacher, and he teaches Dutch in a school in Antwerp, and he tries to always, when he gives like grammar assignments, tries to use texts that refer to colonial history, because that's his way of getting the knowledge in there. And he gets really like called out for it. Like he will have to go to the principal and explain this shit. But to me, that's insane. There's a lot of things that are so obviously wrong. Like we all know that this is completely wrong and that there's a gaping gap in this history that we are not being told, that I will admit that I did not even know about, even though I grew up here, I went to the best schools, everything. So I think you made a very important point, and I think that it has to be one of our main like pillars in our Black struggle, is to educate people about the actual history. And this is not Black history, this is just history. This is just Belgian history. The colonies are not Black history. That's the only thing that frustrates me about Black History Month, is that this is why I'm making t-shirts saying my history is your history, because this is something that everybody should know. That's the only thing I wanted to add to that.
So the final question, maybe Nicole and Chrissy can close up the evening.
Now we have too many.
Too many mics.
Maybe I can just briefly answer the question that you asked, how can you implement change from the top down? And I tried to express that earlier when I was trying to say that, you know, of course, diversifying the student body, that is also something that happens first on its own. Like the students come, they feel, you know, attracted to these subjects. Then I see my job more because they have, the interest is there, like that's their thing, they have that, the passion and all of that. But it's very subtle how people are pushed out. And it can sometimes be that, I mean, earlier we talked about that too, that, you know, like really sitting down with people and talking through things and not just, you know, handing something back and saying this is bad and discouraging people, and instead like also questioning our own lenses through which we have to grade these things, because they're in many cases, I mean, those of you who are in the field or who have been to university also know that you get to the point where it's like, yeah, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Is this, you know, what can I do to actually live up to the things that I believe? And the more important thing is, after, like, it's not after, it's like simultaneously. Something that I talk a lot about to Black women in particular is pay. Is that, you know, often they make people so small that they don't make demands. So I'll just give you an example from my school. I don't know, for Americans, there will be probably a reality check how little we make actually. So if someone is an adjunct professor, they make about 1,000 euro per semester. So that's 14 sessions, all the preparation, the grading, yes, per class. So 1,000, you can have your PhD, they take you on, that's kind of the deal. And, you know, and for a lot of people that are adding diversity to the team, that's usually the offer. It's like, oh, can be an adjunct. And then I try to use my knowledge of the field and also the habitus that I have picked up, because I wasn't given that, like from my family background, but like to say, wait a minute, is that, and I can actually, I wish I could show you my phone. I just had a conversation with someone who we are hiring as of April, who was offered that. And then I said, no, that's not the best deal you can get. And instead there are other ways that will actually pay you 1,000 a month for the same job. It's a matter of knowing the system, but you can only know that when you're in the system. And it's about, you know, informing people, telling people, but to actually share that knowledge that we have. And I'm sure there's more that I can know because I'm not part of the boys club again. So I just sometimes see conferences being funded where I'm like, wow, like where did they get that money from? It makes me angry. I don't know how they do it. I don't know, but like, I mean, the secrets that we know, we can share them. And that's, I understand that there is a lot of conflict about, you know, how much should you be part of the system to change it? It's difficult. It's difficult. And but on the other hand, if someone has a paycheck for 3 years and know they can finish their project, there's also self-care.
I think the only thing I would like to add is we need to pay attention to the terms that we use, so the diversity, even the idea of super diversity. In the Netherlands, for example, super diversity has been launched by these professors in Rotterdam, where super diversity could also mean that a white man on stage with us could be super diverse, right? Because of the different axes and things going on. So a lot of times diversity becomes this hollow concept that actually does not mean the changing of the system, but it just means adding a different face to perpetuate the system. So I think there as well, it's understanding like, okay, what are we doing when we talk about inclusion, and what ideas are we including that will end up changing things? So even in terms of thinking about how do we change it from top down, if we're talking about boards and if we're talking about politicians, what political ideas are they pushing? What type of change will they bring to boards of companies, of public institutions when they get in there? And I think there is the question that we need to start asking each other, like, okay, if you want to go for that position of power, what exactly do you understand as power? And there is how we make the change, I think.
All right, that's a powerful note to end on. So first off, thank all of you for sitting here, sticking with us, asking questions, having a conversation. I'm going to ask you to applaud for yourself. You're going to have to do the work again. And also, thanks to our panel. Thank you for doing this and having a beautiful conversation. Thank you very much. Now, let's party, I guess. There's a party, right? So yeah, see that, it's there.
Give a